The 6-footed frame of Colton Ravencrest froze mid-swing as the axe blade bit deep into the oak log. Those 5 words spoken by a woman's voice behind him shattered 16. Years of carefully constructed silence like glass hitting stone. Is your bed still empty? He didn't turn around? Couldn't? The last time a woman had spoken to him with such bold intimacy. She'd been walking away from him forever, her wedding dress trailing in the dust of Millbrook's main street. That was the day he'd stopped talking to anyone who wasn't absolutely necessary for survival. I asked you a question, Giant. The voice carried a musical lilt that made his weathered hands tremble against the axe handle. Still, he kept his back turned, shoulders rigid beneath his worn flannel shirt. The woman's shadow fell across the woodpile, and he could smell her honeysuckle and something wild, untamed. Folks in town say you haven't said more than 10 words to anyone since Mayor's daughter left you at the altar, she continued, her boots crunching on wood chips as she circled him like a predator studying prey. They say you've built this cabin so far from Millbrook because you can't stand the sight of other people's happiness. Colton's jaw clenched. The gossips had it mostly right, though they didn't know the half of it. They didn't know about the letters he'd burned unread, or the nights he'd stood on his porch with a loaded rifle, waiting for ghosts that never came. But I think they're wrong about you, Colton Ravencrest. His name on her lips made him flinch. Slowly, against every instinct, screaming at him to maintain his protective silence. He turned. The woman standing in his clearing defied every expectation Millbrook had taught him about proper ladies. Curves filled out her riding pants in white, cotton blouse in ways that made his mouth go dry. Auburn hair tumbled over her shoulders in wild waves. Green eyes studied him with an intensity that felt like being stripped bare. But it was her smile, confident, knowing, absolutely fearless, that knocked the air from his lungs. "You're beautiful," she said simply. As if commenting on the weather, the compliment hit him like a physical blow. Beautiful. No one had called him beautiful since the woman who'd promised to love his scars and his silence, then fled when she realized loving a broken man meant breaking herself. "Who are you?" The words escaped before he could stop them, the first unnecessary words he'd spoken to a stranger in over a decade. Her smile widened, transforming her face from pretty to absolutely radiant. Izuda Nightingale. "I bought the old Whitmore place last month." She stepped closer, close enough that he could see golden flecks in her green eyes. "And I've been watching you chop wood for weeks, wondering what it would take to make the legendary Silent Giant of Millbrook County remember how to use his voice. You're wasting your time." The words came out rougher than he intended, but he forced himself to hold her gaze. "I don't talk. I don't socialize. Good thing I'm not interested in talking." Her eyes traveled slowly down his body and back. Up, bold as brass, at least not right away. Heat flooded his face, his neck, his entire body. 16 years of celibacy and emotional numbness, and this wild-haired woman, with her shameless words and knowing eyes, was threatening to undo it all in minutes. "You should go." He turned back to his woodpile, raising the axe with hands that shook slightly. "Before dark." "Should I?" She didn't move. He could feel her watching him, could hear the smile in her voice. "Or should I stay and find out if that big empty bed of yours needs some company tonight?" The axe fell from his suddenly nerveless fingers. Isolde watched the massive cowboy's shoulders shake as the axe clattered to the ground. And she knew she had him exactly where she wanted him, completely off balance and utterly defenseless. "Can't just say things like that," Colton whispered, his voice hoarse with something between shock and desperate hunger. "Why not?" She moved closer, drawn by the vulnerable tremor in his rough baritone. "Because proper ladies don't proposition silent giants? Because nice women don't ask if a man's bed is cold and empty?" She reached out and touched his forearm, feeling the corded muscle jump beneath her fingertips.
"Oh, lucky for you."
Never been accused of being either proper or nice. He spun around so fast she stumbled backward, but his massive hands caught her waist, steadying her. The moment his palms made contact with her body, his breathing changed, became ragged, desperate. "I don't." But even as he said it, his thumbs traced small circles against her ribs, through the thin cotton of her blouse. "Don't do this to me." "Do what?" She pressed closer, eliminating the space between them until her breasts brushed his chest with each breath. "Ask you honest questions. Touch you like you're a man instead of a ghost?" His grip tightened on her waist. "You don't understand." "I'm not." "Can't what? Feel? Want? Need?" She reached up and traced the scar that ran from his left temple to his jaw, pale line that spoke of old violence and older pain. "Because your body's telling me different stories, Colton." He flinched at her touch but didn't pull away. "How do you know about the scar?" "I told you. I've been watching." Her finger followed the mark's path down to where it disappeared beneath his collar. "I know you got it in a bar fight 3 months before your wedding. I know you built this cabin with your own hands after she left. I know you haven't touched another woman since." Jesus. The word came out like a prayer or a curse. "What kind of woman are you? The kind who sees a beautiful, lonely man wasting away in the woods and decides to do something about it?" She stood on tiptoe, bringing her mouth close to his ear. "The kind who's not afraid of scars or silence or broken hearts." His whole body shuddered. Esoda ... say it again. She nipped at his earlobe, smiling when he gasped. "Love how my name sounds in that deep voice of yours. This is insane." But his hands were sliding up her back, tangling in her loose hair. "I don't even know you. You know I'm not afraid of you. You know I want you." She pulled back to meet his eyes, seeing the war raging there between desire and self-protection. "And you know your bed has been empty for 16 years because you've been waiting for someone brave enough to climb into it." "I haven't been waiting for anything." The denial sounded hollow even to him. Liar. She pressed her palm flat against his chest, feeling his heart hammering beneath her touch. "You've been waiting for someone who wouldn't run. Someone who'd see all that passion you've been bottling up and want to set it free. And you think you're that someone." His voice dropped to a whisper that sent shivers down her spine. "I know. I am." She rose up and brushed her lips against his, the barest whisper of contact that made him groan deep in his throat. "The question is whether you're brave enough to let me prove it." For a moment, she thought he might actually pull her closer, might give in to the need she could see burning in his dark eyes. But then his hands dropped away from her, and he stepped back like she'd burned him. "No." The word came out flat, final. "I can't. I won't." But as he walked away toward his cabin, shoulders rigid with denial, Isolde noticed he didn't tell her to leave.
Act.
And when she called after him, "I'll be back tomorrow," Colton Ravencrest. She saw him stumble slightly before disappearing through his front door. She smiled and gathered her riding gloves from where she dropped them. The giant cowboy might think he was protecting himself by running away, but he'd already given her everything she needed to break down his walls. Tomorrow, she'd show him exactly what he'd been missing. Colton didn't sleep. He paced his cabin like a caged wolf, her words echoing in his mind with every footstep. "Is your bed still empty?" The question haunted him, taunted him, because the answer was so much more complicated than yes or no. His bed was empty, yes. But his dreams were full of her wild auburn hair spread across his pillow, green eyes dark with passion, that bold mouth whispering his name in the darkness. He'd awakened hard and aching, his body betraying 16 years of careful emotional. Controlled dawn found him back at the woodpile, swinging his axe with savage intensity, trying to work the memory of her touch out of his system. But every crack of splitting wood seemed to echo her voice, beautiful, lonely, waiting. He was so lost in his torment that he almost missed the sound of hoofbeats on the trail. She came riding through the morning mist like something out of a fever dream, her hair streaming behind her as she guided a massive black stallion through the trees. This time she wore an emerald green dress that hugged every dangerous curve. And when she dismounted, the fabric clung to her legs in ways that made his mouth go dry. Morning, beautiful. She approached him with that same fearless confidence, carrying a wicker basket that smelled like fresh bread and honey. "I brought breakfast. I told you not to come back." But his eyes betrayed him, drinking in every detail of her appearance like a man dying of thirst. "You told me you couldn't, and you wouldn't. You never actually told me to stay away." She spread a blanket on the ground near his woodpile, and began unpacking the basket. Besides, I thought you might be hungry after a sleepless night. His axe hesitated mid-swing. How do you know I didn't sleep? Because you're chopping wood like you're trying to kill it. There are shadows under your eyes that weren't there yesterday. She looked up at him with those knowing green eyes. Also because I can see your bedroom window from the trail, and your lamp was burning all night. Heat flooded his cheeks. You were watching my cabin? I was camping nearby. She patted the blanket beside her. Come eat, Colton. You look like you haven't had a decent meal in weeks. He wanted to refuse, wanted to maintain the distance that had kept him safe for so long. But the smell of fresh biscuits and the sight of her sitting in a pool of emerald silk proved too much for his weakened defenses. This is a mistake, he muttered, but he set down his axe and approached the blanket. Probably. She handed him a plate loaded with eggs, bacon, and biscuits still warm from the oven. But some mistakes are worth making. They ate in comfortable silence, and Colton found himself stealing glances at her profile, mesmerized by the way sunlight caught in her hair. When she licked honey from her fingers, his pulse hammered so hard he was sure she could hear it. Tell me about her, Isolde said suddenly. His fork froze halfway to his mouth. Who? The woman who broke you so thoroughly that you've been hiding? In these woods for 16 years? I don't talk about her. The words came out sharp, defensive. You don't talk about anything. She turned to face him fully, her expression surprisingly gentle. But maybe it's time you did. His plate, his appetite suddenly gone. So you can run away too when you realize what kind of man you're dealing with. What kind of man are you dealing with, Colton? The question hung in the air between them, loaded with more weight than seemed possible. He stared at her, this bold, beautiful woman who'd somehow seen through his carefully constructed walls and felt something crack open in his chest. The kind who loved someone so completely, it nearly destroyed him when she left. The words tumbled out before he could stop them. The kind who built this place, because he couldn't stand being around other people's happiness. The kind who's been dead inside for so long he'd forgotten what it felt like to want something. And now, her voice was soft, careful. Now you show up asking about my empty bed, and suddenly I can't think about anything else. He met her eyes, letting her see the raw hunger he'd been trying to hide. I want you so badly it's tearing me apart, but I can't. I won't survive it if you leave too. She moved closer, her hand coming up to rest against his cheek. What if I promised not to leave? Promises are just words. But he leaned into her, touched despite himself. And words don't mean anything when someone decides they can't handle loving a broken man. Then don't ask me to promise. She leaned closer, her breath warm against his lips. Ask me to prove it. Prove it how? Colton's voice came out rough and strained, his dark eyes searching her face for answers he wasn't sure he was ready to. Here, instead of answering with words, Isolde rose gracefully to her knees and began unbuttoning her dress, her fingers working with deliberate slowness that made his breathing shallow. What are you doing? He grabbed her wrists, but gently his massive hands completely engulfing hers. Showing you that I'm not going anywhere. The emerald fabric slipped off her shoulders, revealing creamy skin and delicate lace beneath. Proving that some women don't run from intensity, they run toward it. Isolde, wait.
Act.
But even as he protested, his eyes traced the curves revealed by the falling dress, and his grip on her wrists loosened. You don't understand what you're asking for. I'm not asking for anything, Colton. She pulled her hands free and reached for the buttons of his shirt. I'm taking what I want. And what I want is to see what 16 years of loneliness and hard work have done to this beautiful body of yours. His shirt fell open under her determined fingers, revealing a chest and shoulders sculpted by years of physical labor. Scars crisscrossed his torso, some old and faded. Others more recent, each one telling a story of violence or accident or simple carelessness. Jesus, she breathed, her hands splaying across his chest, tracing the network of old wounds. Magnificent. I'm damaged. The words came out bitter, self-deprecating, inside and out. You're survived. Her lips found the scar over his heart, a thin line that spoke of a knife blade that had come too close to ending everything. Every mark on your body is proof that you're still here, still fighting, still alive. He shuddered under her touch, his resolve crumbling like ancient stone. This is insane. We're in the middle of the woods. No one comes up. Here but you and me. She pushed him back onto the blanket, her body following him down. And even if they did, I don't care. Let them see. Let them know that the legendary silent giant of Millbrook County finally found someone who isn't afraid of his passion. Her mouth found his throat, his collarbone, the hollow at the base of his neck, and he was lost.
Oh.
Need erupted like a dam breaking, his hands tangling in her hair as he rolled her beneath him. Tell me to stop, he gasped against her ear, his body trembling with the effort of maintaining control. Tell me this is moving too fast, that you need time to think? Stop talking and kiss me, you beautiful fool. He kissed her like a drowning man, gasping for air, all desperate hunger and barely leashed intensity. She met his passion with her own, her nails raking down his back as she arched beneath him. I don't know how to be gentle anymore, he whispered. Against her lips, his voice breaking with vulnerability. I don't know how to be anything but desperate and hungry and half crazy with wanting. Then don't be gentle. She bit his lower lip, smiling when he groaned. Be desperate. Be hungry. Be everything you've been hiding from the world. What followed was a claiming that left them both breathless and shaking, their bodies moving together, with an intensity that bordered on violence. But beneath the fierce passion was something else, a tenderness, a recognition. A sense of two broken pieces finally finding their missing halves. Afterward, they lay entwined on the blanket, her head on his chest, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. The morning sun filtered through the trees, casting golden light across their tangled bodies. Isolde. Name came out like a prayer. Isolde. Her name came out like a prayer. Why me? There must be a dozen men in Millbrook who would court. You properly give you the life you deserve. She lifted her head to look at him, her green eyes serious. So those men would want to change me, tame me, make me into their idea of what a woman should be. She pressed a kiss to his chest, right over his heart. But you see me exactly as I am, wild and bold and completely improper, and you want me anyway. I more than want you. The admission came out hoarse, vulnerable. I think I'm falling in love with you, and that terrifies me more than anything else in this world. Good. Her smile was radiant, transforming her face from beautiful to absolutely luminous. Because I've already fallen, and I was starting to worry I'd be making the trip alone. He stared at her, this incredible woman who'd walked into his life like a force of nature and turned everything upside down. What happens now? Now, she's stretched like a cat in the sunshine, completely unself-conscious in her nakedness. You stop hiding in these woods like a wounded animal. Now you remember what it's like to live instead of just survive. If I can't. If I'm too broken to be what you need. She silenced him with a kiss that tasted like honey and promises. Then we'll be broken together, and maybe that will be enough to make us whole. 3 weeks later, Colton found himself doing something he hadn't done in 16 years, walking down Millbrook's main street with a woman on his arm. The whispers started the moment they appeared, rippling through the town like wildfire. Is that really Colton Ravencrest? Who's that woman with him? I heard she bought the old Whitmore place, ... She's got him talking again, can you believe it? Isolde squeezed his arm, her touch grounding him, when the stares and murmurs threatened to send him retreating back to his cabin. Breathe, beautiful. They're just curious, not hostile. They're remembering, he muttered, his jaw tight with old humiliation. Remembering the last time I walked down this street with a woman who said she loved me? I'm not her. Isolde stopped walking and turned to face him, her green eyes fierce with determination. I will never be her. And if you can't see the difference, then maybe we need to talk about what's really keeping you trapped in the past. Before he could respond, a familiar voice cut through the crowd noise. Well, I'll be damned. Colton Ravencrest, back among the living. They turned to see Marshal Tobias Whitehorse approaching, his weathered face split by a genuine smile. Lawman had been one of the few people who'd tried to maintain contact after Colton's self-imposed exile, though his efforts had been largely rebuffed. Tobias. Colton's greeting was cautious, but not unfriendly. And you must be the mysterious Miss Nightingale who's got the whole county talking. The marshal tipped his hat to Isolde with old-fashioned courtesy. "Pleasure to meet you, ma'am." "The pleasure's mine, Marshal." Isolde's smile was warm, charming. "Oh, I have to admit, I'm curious about what exactly people are saying." "The usual small-town gossip, that you're some kind of witch who's cast a spell on our resident hermit." Tobias chuckled at Colton's scowl. "That you rode into town on a black horse like something out of a fairy tale and brought our giant back to life with a kiss?" "Not entirely inaccurate," Isolde said, making Colton's face burn red, though it took more than one kiss. "Isolde," Colton warned, but there was affection in his voice rather than real annoyance. "What? It's true." She grinned up at him with absolutely no shame. "You're a very stubborn man, Colton Ravencrest. Bringing you back to life was a considerable undertaking." Tobias laughed outright. "I like her already. She's got fire, reminds me of my late wife." His expression grew more serious. "It's good to see you back in town, Colton. We've missed you, have you?" The question came out sharper than intended, laden with old bitterness. "Of course we have. You were part of this community once before." Tobias caught himself, glancing apologetically at Isolde. "Well, before things went sideways. Point is, you belong here as much as anyone." "That's not how I remember it." Colton's voice was flat, distant. "I remember a lot of pitying looks and whispered conversations about the poor fool who got left. At the altar? That was 16 years ago, son. People move on, forget about old scandals. Most folks just remember you as the man who built half the barns in the county and never charged a penny more than fair." Isolde felt the tension in Colton's arm, saw the way his jaw clenched at the mention of his past humiliation. She'd heard the story from various townspeople over the past weeks, how Cordelia Whitmore had stood him up on their wedding day, how she'd run off with a traveling salesman rather than marry the scarred, silent man who loved her. What happened to her? Question escaped before Colton could stop it. "Cordelia, did she ever come back?" Tobias shook his head. "Got word a few years back that she'd married some banker in San Francisco. Has 3 children now." From what I heard, something shifted in Colton's expression. Not pain, exactly, but a kind of weary acceptance. "Good for her." "You mean that?" Isolde realized, studying his face. "Yeah, I do." He looked down at her with something like wonder in his dark eyes. "Funny thing is, a month ago that news would have destroyed me all over again. But now ... Lifted their joined hands and pressed a kiss to her knuckles, oblivious to the interested stares of passers-by. "Now I'm just grateful she had the courage to leave, because if she hadn't, I never would have been available when you decided to storm into my life." "Well, damn," Tobias said softly. "That's about the healthiest thing I've ever heard come out of your mouth, Colton. Don't sound so surprised." Colton was smiling now, really smiling. Isolde felt her heart skip at the transformation it wrought on his craggy features. "I'm full of surprises these days." "Speaking of surprises," the marshal said, his tone becoming carefully casual, "there's something you should know. The autumn festival's coming up next month, and the town council was hoping." He paused, clearly, choosing his words carefully. "Well, they were hoping you might consider participating this year. Maybe entering some of your woodwork in the craft competition, or lending a hand with the barn dance preparations." Colton's smile faded slightly. "I don't think we'll be there," Isolde interrupted, squeezing his arm. "Won't we? Beautiful?" All eyes turned to Colton, and for a moment he looked like he might bolt back to the safety of his isolated cabin. But then he looked down at Isolde, this brave, wild woman who'd somehow convinced him that hiding wasn't the same as healing, and straightened his shoulders. "Yeah," he said, his voice growing stronger with each word. "Yeah, we'll be there." Night before the autumn festival, Colton stood on his cabin porch staring down at the lights of Millbrook, his hands gripping the railing so tightly his knuckles had gone white. Isolde found him there when she returned from her evening ride, his massive frame rigid with tension. "Having second thoughts?" she asked gently, moving to stand beside him. "Third and fourth thoughts." He didn't look at her, his dark eyes fixed on the distant town. "What if I can't do this, Isolde? What if I get down there tomorrow and freeze up, make a fool of myself all over again? Then you'll make a fool of yourself." She slipped her arms around his waist from behind, pressing her cheek against his. broad back. And I'll be right there making a fool of myself with you. You don't understand. It's the last time I was at a town gathering. He trailed off, his whole body shuddering. Was your wedding day? She finished quietly. I know, do you? Do you really know what it was like to stand in front of the entire town, waiting for a woman who never came? To see the pity in their eyes, hear the whispers about how I should have known better than to think someone like her could love someone like me? She tightened her arms around him. No, I don't know what that was like. But I know what it's like to be so afraid of being hurt that you cut yourself off from everything good in life. I know what it's like to build walls so high that nobody can reach you even when they want to. He turned in her arms, his face etched with surprise. You do? Why do you think I was living alone in that big house, Colton? Why do you think a woman my age has never married? Never even come close? She reached up to trace the scar along his jaw. I've been running from love just as hard as you have, just in different ways. What changed? You did? Her smile was soft, vulnerable in a way he'd rarely seen. You were so beautiful in your brokenness, so strong in your solitude, and I realized that if I was going to risk my heart on anyone, it should be on a man who understood the price of loving unwisely. I love you. The words came out hoarse, desperate. God help me, Isolde. I love you so much it scares me. I love you too. She stood on tiptoe to kiss him, pouring all her fierce devotion into the contact. Which is why we're going to that festival tomorrow, and we're going to dance, and we're going to show this whole damn town that Colton Ravencrest isn't hiding anymore. What if no? She pressed her fingers to his lips, silencing his protests. No more what-ifs, no more hiding. Tomorrow, you're going to walk into that festival with your head held high, and you're going to remember that you're not the broken man who got left at the altar. You're the man who survived 16 years of self-imposed exile and came out stronger. You're the man who built this place with his bare hands, who can swing an axe all day without breaking a sweat, who makes love like he's worshipping at an altar. Heat flared in his eyes at her last words. Isolde, you're the man I choose, she continued, her voice fierce with conviction. Every day, every night, for as long as you'll have me. And anyone who can't see how magnificent you are doesn't deserve to share the same air as you. He stared down at her for a long moment, this wild, beautiful woman who'd somehow seen past his scars in silence to the man beneath. Then, without warning, he swept her up in his arms and carried her toward the cabin. Where are we going? She laughed, though she already knew the answer. To bed. His voice was rough with need, and something else, hope, maybe, or determination. Because if I'm going to face the whole town tomorrow, I want to spend tonight reminding myself what I'm fighting for. The festival dawned clear and bright, with the kind of crisp autumn air that made everything seem possible. Colton dressed carefully in his best clothes, dark pants, white shirt, and a vest that Isolde had insisted brought out his eyes. When she emerged from the bedroom in a dress of deep burgundy that hugged her curves like a second skin, he nearly lost his nerve entirely. You're going to kill me in that dress, he said, his voice rough with appreciation. That's the idea. She straightened his tie with practiced efficiency. I want every man at that festival to know exactly what you're going home with tonight, Isolde. Nightingale, you are absolutely shameless, and you love it. She grabbed his hand and pulled him toward the door. Come on, beautiful. It's time to show Millbrook what they've been missing. The walk down to town felt like the longest journey of Colton's life, but with Isolde's hand firm in his and her presence steady beside him, he managed to put one foot in front of the other. As they approached the festival grounds, he could hear music and laughter, could smell roasting meat and fresh apple cider. Ready? Isolde asked. Pausing at the edge of the crowd, Colton looked down at her, this incredible woman who'd stormed into his life and turned everything upside down, and felt something settle into place in his chest. Not peace exactly, but a kind of determined calm. Yeah, he said, surprised to find he meant it. I'm ready. No. The moment they stepped into the festival grounds, conversations stuttered to a halt and heads turned their way. But instead of the whispers and pitying stares Colton had expected, he saw something different in the townspeople's faces: curiosity. Yes, but also a kind of pleased surprise, as if they were genuinely happy to see him. Colton. Martha Goldstone, the baker's wife, bustled over with a warm smile. "How wonderful that you've come. You must be Miss Nightingale. You've heard so much about you." "All good things, I hope," Isolde replied with charming grace. "My dear, the whole town's been talking about how you've brought our hermit back to civilization." Martha beamed at them both. "Though between you and me, I think he looks better than ever. Love suits you, Colton." Before Colton could formulate a response, more people approached the blacksmith. The schoolteacher, several of the local ranchers, each greeted him with genuine warmth, as if his 16-year absence was simply a minor detail rather than a defining characteristic. "How are they all acting like nothing happened?" he murmured to Isolde as they made their way through the crowd. "Because to them nothing did happen," she replied. "You're the only one who's been carrying that shame all these years, Colton. Everyone else moved on decades ago." He spent the afternoon sampling Martha's apple pies, watching the children's games, and admiring the craft displays. Colton's woodwork, 3 intricate carvings that Isolde had entered without his knowledge, drew considerable attention and praise. "These are extraordinary," Judge Cornelius Ashford said, examining a carved eagle with minute attention to detail. "The craftsmanship is museum quality." "I told you," Isolde said, squeezing Colton's arm. "You're not just a hermit in the woods, you're an artist." As evening approached, the musicians took their places and couples began forming for the barn dance. Colton felt his old anxiety returning as memories of his wedding day threatened to surface. "I can't," he said suddenly, backing away from the dance floor. "This is where we were supposed to. I can't do this, Isolde." "Yes, you can." Her voice was firm but gentle. "'Cause this isn't then, and I'm not her. This is now, and you're here with me. What if I can't remember how to dance? Then I'll teach you." She held out her hand, her green eyes steady and sure. "Trust me, Colton. Trust us." He stared at her outstretched hand for a long moment, aware that everyone in the crowd was watching, waiting. This was his moment of choice: retreat back to his safe isolation, or step forward into an uncertain but hopeful future. Slowly, he reached out and took her hand. The first dance was awkward, his movements stiff with nerves and long disuse. But Isolde was patient, guiding him through the steps with whispered encouragement and radiant smiles. By the second song, muscle memory was returning. By the third, he was spinning her across the floor with growing confidence. "There you are," she laughed as he dipped her dramatically.
Ow.
"There's my beautiful, graceful giant." "I'd forgotten," he said, wonder in his voice. "I'd forgotten how good this felt." "What, dancing, being alive?" He pulled her close as the music shifted to a slower waltz. "Really, truly alive instead of just surviving." As they swayed together under the lantern light, other couples giving them respectful space, Colton felt the last of his walls crumble away. This woman in his arms, bold, beautiful, utterly fearless, had done more than heal his broken heart. She'd given him back his life. "Marry me," he said suddenly, the words escaping before he could second-guess them. "What?" She stumbled slightly, her eyes wide with shock. "Marry me, Isolde Nightingale?" He stopped dancing, his hands framing her face as the entire festival seemed to fade away around them. "I know it's crazy. I know we haven't been together long. But I can't imagine spending another day without you as my wife." The music continued around them, but neither heard it. The crowd pressed closer, sensing something momentous happening in their midst. "Colton." Her voice was breathless, tears shimmering in her green eyes. "I know this is the same place where I got my heart broken 16 years ago," he continued, his voice growing stronger with each word. "But that's exactly why I want to ask you here now, in front of all these people. I want to replace that old memory with something beautiful. I want everyone to know that Colton Ravencrest isn't the broken man who got left behind. He's the man who found his way back to love." A collective sigh rose from the watching crowd. Several women were dabbing at their eyes with handkerchiefs. "You sure?" she whispered, searching his face. "Really, truly sure? Because if you're just caught up in the moment, I've never been more sure of anything in my life." He dropped to one knee right there on the dance floor, pulling a simple gold band from his vest pocket, his mother's ring, which he'd been carrying like a talisman for weeks. "Isolde Nightingale, you stormed into my life like a force of nature and reminded me what it means to be alive. You saw past my scars and my silence to the man I could be again. You're wild and bold and completely improper, and I love every magnificent inch of you. Oh, Colton. Tears were streaming down her face now. Will you marry me? Will you be my wife, my partner, my reason for coming down from that mountain every single day? The entire festival held its breath. Even the musicians had stopped playing, waiting for her answer. Isolde looked down at this beautiful, broken, healing man kneeling before her, offering his heart with a courage that took her breath away. Then she threw back her head and laughed a sound of pure joy that rang across the festival grounds like church bells. Yes, she cried, launching herself into his arms as he rose. Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause as Colton spun her around, both of them laughing and crying at the same time. When he finally set her down and slipped the ring onto her finger, Marshal Whitehorse stepped forward with a grin. Well, I'll be damned, he said loudly enough for everyone to hear. Looks like we're going to have another wedding in Millbrook. And this time, I guarantee the groom won't be standing at the altar alone. More cheers, more applause. The musicians struck up a celebratory tune, and soon the entire festival was dancing around the newly engaged couple. No regrets? Isolde asked, later as they swayed together under the stars, her head on his shoulder. Only one, Colton murmured against her hair. Her heart skipped. What? That it took me 16 years to find you? He pulled back to look at her, his dark eyes soft with love and wonder. Maybe that's how it was supposed to be. Maybe I needed to be broken first, so I could appreciate what it means to be whole. We're going to be so happy, she whispered, rising up to kiss him. So incredibly, ridiculously happy, I know. He smiled, that radiant, transformative smile that still took her breath away. I can feel it, as the festival continued around them, as the people of Millbrook celebrated their love with genuine joy. Colton Ravencrest held his future wife in his arms and marveled at the strange turns life could take. 16 years ago, he'd been left broken and humiliated in this very place. Tonight, he was surrounded by friends and neighbors who'd welcomed him back with open arms. Engaged to a woman who loved him exactly as he was. The giant cowboy who'd lived in silence for 16 years would never be silent again, not with Isolde Nightingale, soon to be Isolde Ravencrest, by his side, filling his world with laughter and love and the promise of all the tomorrows yet to come. Their wedding. 3 months later was the social event of the season, with half of Millbrook County in attendance. And when the preacher asked if anyone objected to the union, the silence was absolute, not the silence of emptiness that had defined Colton's past, but the silence of complete and unanimous approval. As they kissed to seal their vows, Isolde whispered against his lips, "Was it worth the wait, my beautiful giant?" "Every single day of it," he whispered back. Every single day. And in the years that followed, as they filled their mountain home with children and laughter, as Colton became one of Millbrook's most respected citizens, and Isolde earned a reputation as the town's most charming hostess, they would often return to that first question she'd asked him, "Is your bed still empty?" The answer, they both knew, would forever be a resounding no.